It's a connection between grace and joy. They both in the Greek start with this C-H-A-R, care. And it means leaning into or leaning towards. So in grace, it's God leaning towards us, showing us and giving us his forgiveness and love that bring us a hope, right? He's leaning towards us when he sends Jesus to die on the cross and rise again for us. And joy is us really leaning into that grace and knowing what it is in our lives. The school theme for this year is Make a Joyful Noise, and I think Dr. Stellwagen just wanted to remind us what a joyful noise sounds like in all of that, and what an amazing thing it is to have everyone here and worshiping together. Over the last few weeks, we've been looking at a sermon series called His Kingdom First. It connects in with our capital campaign and what Craig and Rhonda were talking about. And as we've done that, we've been looking at different parables. And so we're going to look at 3 parables today. But before we get there, I just want to give a little bit of thoughts before we start reading them. A little bit of an aha came to me as I was in our Emmanuel St. Michael 8th grade religion class for Mrs. Vandekeer. And if you're in Mrs. Vandekeer's class, I am sorry that you're going to have to see this again. But I gave a quiz a little over a week ago, and it looked something like this. And in that, I asked the students actually to get into the Greek and come up with a word from Philippians 4:4-8, which is, it starts out, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. And it goes on from there. And I asked them to do a quick word study, like 10 minutes. And gave them the resources to do it. And they looked up the Greek word and some other pieces of information that would help them understand what that meant. And as they did that, a lot of the students picked the Greek word rejoice or joy. They're connected, right? Rejoice is actively kind of having joy. So they were connected. And as we looked at that, I saw another connection. And it was a little bit of this, okay, here we go. And then it connected into our parables that we're going to talk about today. Because in those parables, there's a piece that talks about joy and rejoicing. And so there was this connection. Well, here's the connection that I found as we were looking into these words. It's a connection between grace and joy. They both in the Greek start with this C-H-A-R, care. And it means leaning into or leaning towards. So in grace, it's God leaning towards us, showing us and giving us his forgiveness and love that bring us a hope, right? He's leaning towards us when he sends Jesus to die on the cross and rise again for us. And joy is us really leaning into that grace and knowing what it is in our lives. And so as I was looking at this in the parables, kind of saw how grace leads, joy follows, and how do we respond? How do we respond? And so we're going to look at these 3 parables now. And if you have your book with you, it's on page 42. And I'm going to invite you to stand as we hear the words of Jesus in these parables. In Matthew 13, we read, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away, sold everything he had, and bought it." And in Luke 15, Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. This is the gospel of the Lord. I invite you to be seated. As we read these parables, we have kind of talked about the parables being a story that's put next to a biblical truth, right? And so if we look at these three parables in that light, we see that if we take out the kingdom of heaven is like, out of the first two parables, we can see what it's like to be in those shoes, right? You may have experienced kind of what Dr. Stellwagen was talking about, being on a beach and looking for treasure, or you may have found something in, say, a pawn shop and known what it was like to just drop everything and go. I think when we think about our treasures, it really helps us understand what it is that's important to us. And so my question for today is, what are you leaning into? If someone were to give you $500 today, what would you spend it on? What would you lean into? And I think that question is different for all of us, right? Some of us, it might be a vice. Some of us, it might be our family. Some of us, it might be getting out of just a little bit more debt. But each and every one of us has something that comes to mind that we would spend that money on, right? And so as you think about where you're at today, what is it that you're leaning into? Where is it that you find your treasure? Looking at these parables, we know it's not just about us and stepping into the shoes of the guy in the field or the merchant or the gal who lost the coin. We know that there is a biblical truth to that. But we also know that we, being sinful people in a sinful world, sometimes would take what we found and it would be just all about us. And we would hold that up, and it might be an idol for us. But that's not where these parables go, because they do start, the kingdom of heaven is like. And so I want to take a look at those biblical truths that they really point us to. And that first parable, right? A hidden treasure. It's found, it's hid again, and then the guy goes and sells everything he has to get it. You see, that treasure was worth more than anything else in the world. If we look at this through the lens of God and the biblical truth that's there, we see that we are actually that treasure. We see that there is no price that was too great for him to come after us. As we look at the other parable within that Matthew text, right, we see a merchant who finds a fine pearl, something that was so precious that they sold everything they had just to go and buy it. God knows a little bit about what that's like, right? In giving his only son to die not just for a couple people, but for all of us in that sacrifice that was over and above anything we could even imagine, he shows how much he loves and forgives us to bring us a hope. I mean, parents, if you think about it, what would it take for you to sacrifice one of your kids, right? It's mind-blowing. It's not even something we can fathom because it's not a part of anything that would be remotely a part of our lives. And yet here we have someone who's giving it all just to find the treasure that is you. And in these, there's nothing that's too far or too wide, that you are too separated from where God is, that he can't find you. And so there's this truth that his love and his forgiveness, that grace that leads, brings a joy. It brings something that changes our lives so that we can lean into it. And then the question is, how do we respond? Well, if we look at the parable of the lost coin, we see that when the coin is found, there's rejoicing. There's bringing people in it together. And then there's angels who are rejoicing as well. There's this element that it's this celebration. So how do we lean into that celebration and what it's like? Because at times in our lives, we don't really feel like celebrating. We don't feel all that happy, right? There's a lot of things that can be there. But this joy and this rejoicing isn't about the feeling. It's about knowing. It's about having an identity in Jesus and the grace that has been given to us, that free gift of his love and forgiveness that have been given to us. So as we lean into it, it's not feeling, it's knowing. It's having an identity in who Jesus is. And with that identity, what are we doing with it? Well, if we take a cue from the woman with her coin, we're sharing it out, right? She doesn't just rejoice by herself. She brings in the people around her to share in that rejoicing. And then it doesn't stop there, but there's angels who are rejoicing over one sinner who repents. Now, we're all here, and we hopefully know God's grace in our lives. But there are people around us who don't, right? There's people in our neighborhoods, maybe in our families, maybe at work. There are different people who we come into contact, who we are a witness for, who we have that joy that we can share. And so how is it that we respond? Well, one of the things that we as a congregation are leaning towards is exactly what Michael said on the video earlier. It's leaving a legacy of people who know their identity in who they are in Jesus, that they are loved and forgiven children of God and have a hope for tomorrow. And so that's what we lean into as we look at this campaign. How can we pour into the next generations in our music and academy? How can we do it in our school? How can we do it in church and Sunday school? And we're all part of that next generation who is sharing the gospel with the people around us. But we also know that those second and third graders are even now learning what it means to be connected to Jesus and to share that connection with the world around them. And how amazing is that? And so as we go into our week, my hope is this, is that as you reflect on these parables, as you reflect on your life, you can see where grace leads. You can see and know that you have an identity in being a loved and forgiven child of God. And that knowledge, that identity helps you lean in to being connected to Jesus and who he is and what he has for you. And then you're able to respond to that in a number of different ways by sharing a story of love and forgiveness with someone who may need it in their day. By just encouraging someone or loving your kids or whatever it may be that you're led to respond to the grace that leads, the joy that follows, and that we reflect on what it means to respond to that. In that booklet that you have, there's all kinds of different follow-up questions for the weekend. And I want to just highlight a couple for us to take home today. So if you go to page 44, there's like a family takeaway. And these are the two questions that I would lift up for you to take into your week with your family. And if you're a single person and don't have family around you, grab someone who is a part of your life and just ask them about it, even if they aren't here right now, right? The first question gets to that identity. Who are you? What are you leaning into, and what does God's grace mean in your life? What is something you treasure, and how does it compare to the value in your value in God's kingdom? Because God paid the ultimate price, right? The sacrifice of his son for you. And how amazing is that? And then how can you show others they are valuable to God and to us? Our mission statement is connecting people to Jesus and others, and that gets into this. How are you connected to Jesus, and how are you connected to others as well? I think it's really about our identity and knowing whose we are in Christ and what he's done for us, and leaning into that. And so one of the ways that we do lean into knowing who Jesus is and what he's done for us, knowing the grace that leads and the joy that follows, we respond by sharing and professing our faith using the creeds. This morning we're going to use the Apostles' Creed. It's a creed from the first century that we still say today, and we say with saints who have gone before us. We're going to talk about those saints who have gone before us in just a little bit, but we remember them even now as we say this creed, and we know that they were part of the body of believers that stretched throughout time and is a part of our church and the greater church that we're a part of. I invite you to stand as we join together in the Apostles' Creed.